Yesterday, we saw chaos erupt at Hoerskool Overvaal in Vereeniging. This after the EFF protested at the school over a High Court ruling resulting in the exclusion of English-speaking pupils to the Afrikaans-speaking school. Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi says he will appeal the decision, citing he does not want people to be excluded and calling for social change. With me now is Thuthukani Ndebele, who is the head of research at the South African Institute of Race Relations. We're going to be chatting a little bit about how schools can, a means of social cohesion within schools. Good to have you. Thanks very, very much for joining us on Morning Live. What do you make of this issue and what's happening at Hoerskool Overvaal?
Well, I think the major thing really is about the practical aspect of things. You know, if you look at the online registration of schools, of pupils at schools, at the grade 1 and grade 8 pupils, what is quite interesting is that the closing date is usually around the middle of the year, and one would suppose that gives enough time for the department to figure out where pupils will be placed and whether those schools are suitable and the like. It's quite disappointing at this stage. I mean, without apportioning blame, but it's quite disappointing that pupils would have found themselves in schools that aren't exactly suitable for them. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, let's look at a broader issue now, and we I suppose can leave the admission requirements for another conversation with particularly the MEC. A lot of people have been complaining about these online registrations. Many people not having access to the internet, but we'll leave that for another conversation. I want to really focus on social cohesion, particularly in schools. What role do schools play in all of this?
I think they play a major role because schools are really part of the formative years of a child's, life. So, what happens at home is meant to be, amplified at school, and schools really play a role in making sure that if there's any stereotypes that you may have picked up, that these are done away with, because essentially you are hoping that you have a situation where there's a lot of interaction between pupils or children of different races, different backgrounds and the like.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at certain schools, and I do, and I say this as a white person living in South Africa, some of the schools out there look exactly the same as when I went to school, where it was just white pupils. You interact, you socialize with white pupils, and you don't ever get to mix races. You don't get to mix cultures. You don't get to understand. And surely that should begin from when kids are this high. And I'm not only isolating and saying it's Afrikaans schools, because it is across the board, but we're finding particularly with Afrikaans schools, because Afrikaans is taught there, and predominantly in this area, there are white pupils going to that school and no black pupils. And what does that do to a society?
I think it really presents a challenge, because then you only really associate with people of a different race in that sense when you get to the stage of, say, a workplace, and then you find yourself having to deal with things that you would rather have dealt with, at school level. But I do think that part of the solution lies, yes, in administration and the like. But I would like to think that because society now is beginning to integrate a lot more, you've got people, what people who would previously have lived in townships and so on, living in the suburbs, that's a good starting point for people to move further in terms of integrating.
Yeah. When we see the court ruling in Hoerskool Overvaal's favour, saying that school it's fine, they can still teach Afrikaans, it can be a medium in that school, but they don't have the facilities to teach in English, and yet that's excluding a big portion of students that are not able to go there. In this day and age in South Africa, shouldn't it be law that provisions be made for pupils that want to go to a school of their choice. Shouldn't it be like that? I mean, after all of these years, when you look at the population here in South Africa, Afrikaans is a small portion of the population as compared to the many other languages and the many other races in South Africa. You know, should courts still be thinking that way? Should schools still be thinking that way? Shouldn't it all be inclusive, or am I living in a dream world?
Well, I'm not fully at par with the details of the case, but my understanding is that the judgment itself was largely influenced by the practical aspect of things. That how do you then convert a single medium school to a dual medium school at such short notice? And this goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that I think that there had to be some sort of provision for the factoring in of a single, of a dual medium regime, bearing in mind that there are time constraints and the like, because you cannot be going to court in January when pupils are supposed to be, you know, already in class.
Yeah.
So the practical aspect of things is what I think didn't get as much urgency as should have been the case.
Yeah. Just finally, we wrap this up, and it's very quickly, if I can ask you, if we look at other schools and models in other classes, in other countries, I beg your pardon, I know we are a unique country, but how does social integration work? What can we learn? What should schools be doing in South Africa to bring our children together? And I say our children because they're going to take this country forward, not us. We've done a bad job. I'm not sure we're doing a good job right now either, but we've got to make them take this country forward. What do we need to do?
I think a huge part of it is the involvement of the private sector, and I know that in most cases when we talk private education, we immediately think huge numbers, huge figures, but there have been a lot of cases, especially in places like Nigeria, Kenya, and so on. We've written a bit about this, where you have private schooling that's actually affordable. And the state, what the state can do is to play a role in ensuring that there's an environment that encourages those kind of practices, and where you have the most essential part being the question of choice. If you're able to take your child wherever you can, then that's the gist of it all.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for this morning. I know it's a bigger issue. We'll hopefully pick this up again. Thuthukani Ndebele, the head of research at the Institute of Race Relations, talking to us about what schools can do to create more social cohesion in our society. Right.